Welcome to the Making Nice with Naughty podcast, where we delve into the art of intimacy for the rule-following, organized, perfectionist, practical, and color within the line types. I'm your co-host, Dr. Tom Murray, a licensed marriage and family therapist, certified sex therapist, and the author of the book that started it all.
Hi, I'm Dr. Frances Robbins, a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. My background includes a master's degrees in nursing and international health, along with a doctorate in business administration. We're here to explore the world of intimacy in a way that resonates with even the most structured and detailed-oriented individuals.
In Making Nice with Naughty, we uncover the secrets to navigating intimacy for those who thrive on rules, order, and perfectionism.
Join us as we discuss practical insights, expert advice, and personal stories that will guide you through the journey of connecting intimately while staying true to your organized and rule-following nature.
Whether you color within the lines or prefer a perfectly outlined plan for everything, we've got you covered.
So buckle up and get ready to explore the fascinating world of intimacy. With us, Making Nice with Naughty is not just a podcast. It's your guide to a fulfilling and organized love life.
This is Making Nice with Naughty. Let's dive in.
Okay, so chapter 4. So let's get back. So last time we talked about in our chapter 4, we had, it was our episode 5. So this is episode 6, which is just amazing in itself. And we were talking about igniting your fire of desire. And the big thing that came out of that is talking about lost intimacy, talking about how the fueling that fire, and you spent some time talking about Gary Chapman's 5 love languages, and then we went into what was a fulfilling relationship. We had a chance to discuss monogamy and what does that mean, and then that sexless relationship, which I thought was so interesting how you defined celibacy as sexless relationship. And we do kind of touch a little bit about that on today's podcast with Do Your Eyes Light Up? And then we wrapped it up with just kind of going over the fuel plus oxygen equals fire and self-aside, which is, it was an interesting concept I had never really spent much time thinking about until being exposed with it in this book. And just as just reminding people as they're listening, this might be the first time they've listened to the podcast. I'd encourage them all to start at first episode so that you can kind of see the traveling down this journey as we go through this book, but also understand that I come to our conversation. Tom obviously is the author, and then I come in just to share my perspectives and relate how my thoughts as an older reader, and then my own personal experiences along with the nursing of the medical aspect of what's being discussed today. And I'm reading the book with you. So I just completed chapter 5, and that's what we're talking about today. So how convenient is that? So what I wanted to ask you today, Tom, is when I started the chapter, again, Do Your Eyes Light Up? You open up with discussing the concept of hypervigilance in that over-controlled temperament or that over-controlled individual. Can you just kind of discuss that concept more for me, just to share some more information about that?
Yeah, so it might help to review how I came up with that title of that chapter. That title was inspired by a quote by Toni Morrison, and there was an interview between Toni Morrison and Oprah Winfrey, and this would have been the late 90s, early 2000s. And in the interview, Toni Morrison is talking about her children coming into the room, and she's immediately noticing that their pants aren't ironed, their hair's out of place, their socks aren't pulled up. All of these just kind of critique. That there's this kind of hypervigilance for looking for what's not right, you see. And what she comes to realize is that what she's communicating to her children is that she's a critical mother, even though she's sending out her children into the world and wants her children to have the best possible impact or impression in the world out there. But what her children experience is a critical mother, you
Right.
see. And she
Right.
says, essentially, I'm paraphrasing, she says, every child, when they walk into a room, they just want to see an adult's eyes light up,
Hmm.
right? And I think for over controlled people, we can be so wrapped up in our own mind chatter about things. We can be so hyper vigilant. We're on edge. We're constantly concerned about any emerging catastrophe around the corner, that we no longer look at our partners with bright eyes, right? And so
Right.
that how do we uh, uh, look at our partners with fresh eyes and communicate to them that they are actually wanted, that they're actually desired.
Yeah, I was trying, later in the chapter you talk about the the eyebrow
The eyebrow wag.
wag. So I was trying to do that to you earlier, but you weren't picking up on it. And then but the mask of neutrality,
Yeah,
you, Tom, do that
exceptionally
amazingly
well.
well. Yes, amazingly well.
Yeah.
And um, I know that you, in what you were just talking about, like talking about children, look for that. Everybody looks for that.
Everybody does.
It's
Yeah.
not unique to children,
Mm-hmm.
you
That's
know.
right.
And we all want to be we all want to come into a space. There's not a person in this, I can't think of anybody who doesn't want to be recognized for what they are without judgment, you know.
Mm.
And when you can walk into a room, it if you if you are engaged in judging others and you spend all your time doing that, you're missing out on that interaction. You're missing
Mm.
out on what's happening, right? Because you're so involved in judging, right? And you miss what's happening around you.
Right. If can I add to that?
Hmm.
Um, there's this concept of what's called the invisible audience. And particularly over controlled people are highly concerned about the opinions of the invisible audience. And the invisible audience is this kind of sense that there are other people are thinking about me. Other people are critiquing me. Other people are having opinions about how I'm showing up in the world and my choices and my children and what my children are doing.
Yes.
Right. And so that
I laugh because I promise you the last thing they're thinking about is you.
that the,
Unless you're that person in the room going, mm, 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 mm.
yeah, yeah. But because of the that concept of the invisible audience, there's this hypervigilance,
Mhm,
this
mhm,
assumption that everybody is
mhm.
so invested in how I show up in the world, then it means that I'm less willing to take risks,
Yeah, yeah.
right? To be playful, to kind of do those things. To circle back to your point, though, we all want to be wanted. We all want
Mhm.
to be desired by the important people in our lives. We all want to be accepted, right? And
Right.
that's the crux of love. I think I share in the book. I don't know if it's in this chapter about love comes from the old English word leaf, lief, which then became the word leave, as in I give you leave. I give you leave to go as you are. And then that word turned into love. So this idea of love and acceptance
Mhm.
are so intertwined. But
Mhm.
when we communicate to our partner or to our children, for that matter, or anybody else, that somehow we prefer that they be different than who they are, then that's not love, that's an agenda. And that really gets noticed by the people on the receiving end.
Sure does. It absolutely does. I also have come into in clinical practice when I've had patients that have come and talked to me and they demonstrate they acknowledge that they are one who does a lot of critiquing. Now they
Mm,
don't know about the over control. They hadn't read your book. They haven't they I didn't know a whole lot about that either until I started reading your book. But they acknowledge that they participate in being judgy or looking at things, and they assume that the whole rest of the world does the same thing to them
right.
you know
Yeah.
and the reality is we're all busy. We're all busy, and we're
Yeah.
all worried about how we look ourselves.
Yeah.
The majority of people sit back and they're concerned about how they come across. And I mean, it seems like that to me. I haven't done a study, but it seemed like a lot of people are too caught up in themselves to think about what's going on with others around them.
Yeah. And yet, the person, our survivalist personality, though, says one of the reasons that people are concerned about the invisible audience is that Thomas Lynch, the developer of radically open dialectical behavior therapy, uh, uses the term tribe, and I know that in some circles that term can feel like it's an appropriation, but that is the language of
Mhm.
RODBT. He uses the word tribe, and that people who are over controlled are very vigilant to any risk or any threat to their membership to the tribe. And so they don't ever want to be kicked out of the tribe, however that is
Mm.
defined for that person. And so if I can avoid upsetting the invisible audience, then
Mhm.
that just ensures I won't be kicked out of the tribe. That it's better that I be concerned about this invisible audience and modify my behavior so I don't get kicked out than to be unconcerned about the invisible audience and accidentally do something that they find offensive and then are kicked out.
Well, so here's my where I'm stuck. If the audience is invisible, how do you get feedback, and how do you monitor how you're doing or not doing? They're invisible. They're not real.
That's right. You don't. You're. It's too much of a risk to get to ask for the feedback to be actually wondering, are people even thinking about me, right? Interestingly, over-controlled people can think highly of themselves,
Mhm.
right? I mean, they're thinking highly of themselves
Mhm.
to the degree that they think the invisible audience is interested in them, but then to find out that actually no one is interested in me.
I so I wonder how many lives in my clinical practice were shattered when I let them know that everybody's too busy. They're not. I
Right.
promise you, they're super busy. They're super busy.
I spend a good deal of my sessions reminding people that they're not special.
Mhm.
You're
Isn't it
not special.
fun?
Yeah,
It's so fun. What other
yeah,
profession, Tom, gets to tell people how it is?
yeah, that's exactly.
And they pay us for it.
Yeah.
We
Well, there's
tell
a
them whatever most people are thinking.
right. Yeah, but and that isn't it a relief to
Mhm.
know I'm not special, that I don't have to be superhuman. In
Right.
fact, it's my striving for superhuman that makes people experience me as aloof, that makes people experience me as unapproachable, right?
Mhm.
It's through my
Mhm.
humanness that people experience me as approachable.
I think that goes really nicely into the into your book, into this chapter where you talk about the miscommunication of that blank face. So
Mm,
when you walk into a room and you have blank affect,
right.
you have no
The
idea
neutral
what I'm
face.
thinking. I can't really do a neutral face myself. It looks more like a riching bitch face. It resting,
Resting, yeah.
but it's like
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you don't know what I'm thinking or not thinking, and so people put thoughts. They
Hmm.
when my experience has been when you don't know everything, you fill in the blanks yourself,
That's right.
and you build your narrative based off of what your own beliefs are, and they could be very skewed, right? So you fill in the blanks, you assume a lot of things, and you're absolutely correct because you know what's going on, but you're so wrong. You're so
Mm-hmm.
wrong. And
Hmm.
I would say, I know, Tom, you have probably mastered that face as you have just moments ago.
I,
I
you
saw
know,
it.
it is it is, well, I was going to say a terrible habit. I think it's just a function of being over controlled. That's such a common characteristic of over controlled people. And I, from a very early age, or certainly in graduate school, when it
Hmm.
became maybe important, is that I had a graduate school professor say to me, Tom, you have perfected the poker face. And he goes, the problem with that, as you alluded to, is that people don't know what you're doing with the information you're giving them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I worked hard to
Hmm.
to be conscious of it, and it really
Hmm.
is an intentionality for people like me.
Hmm.
But sometimes I can also listen with such intensity that the
Hmm.
energy is going to the listening, not to this, right? That
Yeah.
one time, I show this in the book, that I had a client say to me, was sitting at, as often is the case, he's sitting across from me,
Hmm.
and we're midway through the session, and he says to me, um, sometimes I feel that in any given moment, you're going to pull a knife from behind your back and eviscerate me.
Oh shit, Tom.
And
And so, did you pull the knife behind?
no, the only thing I could, what I found myself saying in my best kind of Freudian style was, so you're
Uh-huh.
afraid I might make you spill your guts.
Oh,
But that's what he was registering. That's
wow.
what he was picking
Hmm.
up, was that neutral face, right?
Hmm.
And when it comes to romantic relationships, see, the
Hmm.
neutral face is experienced as threatening, right? It's experienced as threatening, as you so aptly said, because
Hmm.
it's a mystery. What is, when we don't have input, we fill it in the gaps. And
Right.
so uh, 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 partners would misperceive my face as evidence of, I was uninterested, I was angry, I was
Hmm.
moody, I was all of these things, when it was just I was concentrating, or I was intensely listening. But
Hmm.
certainly, I would definitely, in retrospect, agree that at times I would use it as a power move,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and that's not healthy, right?
Yeah.
That's not adaptive. uh,
Sure.
and
Sure.
and anyway,
Well, I mean, that's human. That's human.
being
One
an
thing that
being an asshole.
it is, we all have those moments. I know this has nothing to do with the over controlled person, but also I think it's important for those that are listening today. If you have someone in your life who has Parkinson's disease, Parkinson's
Mm.
disease, one of the unfortunate things that happens is they lose the ability to have those facial expressions. And
Oh,
so
I didn't know
people
that.
with Parkinson's, as the illness progresses, it becomes more and more difficult for them to smile, to raise their eyebrows, to do all the muscle movements that you would normally see in a face. So it's not uncommon. I have had folks in my clinic or seeing me who were caregivers, and usually it's a spouse, it's one of the caregivers, and their spouse or their partner has Parkinson's disease, and so they feel like there's a loss of a connectiveness because they don't have the smile anymore. They don't have the raised eyebrows. They don't have that. Although inside they're the same mentally, they're all the same, so they
Mm,
have a very difficult time expressing their emotions with their face.
mm,
So I just want people to know, as I'm thinking about it, if they have someone in their life who does have Parkinson's, understand that that is not um, because they're not interested in you. It's because they physically are unable to move those muscles and make those connections. And it's even more important to touch and whisper and snuggle, right? So that you can make connections with folks other than through their facial expressions.
mm. What do you think about Botox? Like, what impact does
Oh,
Botox have? Obviously people are doing it for aesthetic purposes, but
mhm.
what is potential impacts of Botox in how we communicate uh, 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 to our partners in these nonverbal
Yeah.
ways, or to our
You
patients?
know, I think that would be such an interesting study to know that. But just, it would seem to me that when you have Botox injections, they can come across very, it can become very exaggerated, that portion of your face. And because of the Botox injections, you lose the ability to do a lot of the wrinkling, right, and the movement. So I would imagine that there is some sort of an impact. I know myself, just out in the world, if I have someone who's talking to me and it's obvious that they have Botox to the point where it's their face is distorted,
Hmm.
it's very it's very difficult for me to stay on task because they're very distracting. You
Hmm.
know, their face is very distracting, and so it takes time for me and really everything I can kind of muster to be able to take care of whatever the question is or the need is at hand, because I just get caught up in looking at, wow, your face is really weird looking. And that's not healthy. But I don't, I would imagine, Tom, that yeah, that somebody who is so is so injected, right, and their
Right.
forehead is so injected that they don't have the ability to wrinkle. And I bet. do you
I
do
think
do
as
you do
I'm knocking,
Botox, Tom? Are you doing
no,
Botox?
no, but because I'm over controlled, and for someone who's knocking on 50, I hardly have any wrinkles. I think I just have Botox running through my veins naturally.
Well, I'm so proud because I think that anybody Botox has a great place in treatment for headaches. It's a wonderful, wonderful
Mm,
you know treatment modality for migraines and such. But I really would ask people to kind of take a pause and look at why they're doing those things,
yeah.
and then if they were able to look at folks who have had treatments maybe 5 or 10 years after the treatment, and they can see what the after effect is, really to love who you are and wear those wrinkles and extra skin with pride, because you deserve it and you've worked hard to earn that stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah. It's probably for a totally different episode, but I, I am all for people making choices that they feel are uh, you know if they're fully informed and it's consensual,
mhm.
people are free to do
Sure,
stuff
sure.
like that. Yet I'm struck by the extent to which, particularly the fillers. I know we're getting off topic,
Mhm.
but the fillers, I think, are such a fascinating phenomenon of the extent to which people will continue to use fillers. Thing that they hoped for was to look more natural becomes then an exaggeration, um,
Yeah.
and they don't get it. As another side, maybe in the future episode, after we run through Making Nice with Naughty and talk about more of the intersection of medicine and sexual health, Botox for vaginismus,
Oh yeah.
is it can be
Yeah.
a very useful tool for people who experience painful sexual penetration to release those
Hmm.
muscles so that there isn't that pain.
Right.
Is also another
Right.
application other than in addition to headaches.
Hmm. Well, as we're kind of got a little off tangent and discussing that blank face and how it can really lead to that misunderstandings. You talk about in your book, you do reference Cheryl Frazier's the Buddhist bedroom or Buddha's bedroom. Uh, I can't even imagine Buddha's bedroom, but it's a very very large bed, or a pallet. Um, but I
That's
wanted
right.
to ask you if you could you talk about um, those mindful exercises and maybe talking some about the what was it, the triangular theory of love. Do you
The
remember the
Sternberg
triangle?
triangular theory
Yes,
of love.
which
Yeah,
was a commitment, passion, and intimacy.
right.
But how does all of that play into that Buddha's bedroom?
Yeah. So I was just talking to a patient today about this. Um, in my humble opinion, uh, no one has studied how the mind works like the Buddhists have.
Mm.
When you think about sitting
Oh
on a
yeah.
cushion for thousands of hours
Mm-hmm.
and you're recording your observations of your own mind, and then you're sharing that knowledge with other people who are sitting on their cushion for thousands of hours and observing the contents of their own mind. And then you uh, compound that by thousands of years of people sitting on cushions, observing their own mind and recording their observations. No one has done that like the Buddhists have. And
Mm-hmm.
so there is the Buddhism as a religion or as a spirituality, but there's also Buddhist psychology, or what's also called contemplative psychology, and that's what really draws me in. And so, one aspect of Buddhist psychology is this concept of acceptance, and of course, many theorists and marriage therapists and et cetera have talked about acceptance. But it really is that, the Buddhists have recognize that it's our resistance to reality that creates the suffering, and that the pathway to peace is in the acceptance of reality. What is, and how can I accept what is without grasping or demanding that reality be different than it is in this moment? Not that I can't make changes in this moment to have a different, to have something
Mm-hmm.
in the, I want to use air quotes around the word future, because as a Buddhist there's no such thing as a future. But how can I correct course, if you will, in the moment to have more of what I want? But it really starts with the power of acceptance. And as I talked about earlier, acceptance is just another way of saying love, right? How do I,
You're
to
stuck in
love
it,
what is.
Tom.
What was that?
I said the whole thing's stuck on my side.
Oh no,
I don't know how far it went on your side.
it was continuing to record.
Okay, well, I looked interested, but you were completely stuck.
I think the upside is that it's recording on my end and recording on your end. So it's
All
not
right,
one recording. But
great,
what did you hear me
great.
say?
Just you were just going off around the Buddhist and I wasn't really following you very well. So, and you're stuck again.
Oh, I am?
Yeah, let's see. That's better.
Shall.
So, so I think what might be better is you were talking about the thousand years, the sitting and then listening, and then you went into about reality and changing reality. And that's when I lost you. I didn't hear anymore after talking about that, understanding what reality is. So you probably could pick up on that.
Yeah. Well, just to kind of the synthesize is that the crux of Buddhism is how do we accept reality as it is? How do we not resist it by arguing against it or demanding that reality to be different than it is? But first, start with that acceptance. And as I said earlier, acceptance and love are really extensions of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I want reality to be what it is, because as soon as I don't want reality to be what it is, I suffer. Right?
So when you talk about that, if I can just interject, we have talked about this before in talking about the heaviness and the light.
Yes.
Feeling
Right.
heavy, feeling light, and how truth is light and things that are false are heavy. When you I really have a hard time grasping this, although I've seen a lot of Buddhists and I spent some time in Thailand. I definitely am not at a level of understanding what all they do, other than I saw them do a lot of the things that they've done. Like I've seen a lot of the Buddhists just sitting there on their cushions. So you said, how do part of the Buddhist is, how do we accept reality as it is?
Mm.
So reality is what I'm experiencing, and reality is what I'm experiencing minus my bias. Or
Minus your
does my
story.
minus my story or my
Yeah.
bias, would bias be that as
Sure.
well?
Yes.
And how do you know how do you separate your story and your bias, because that's who you are?
Well, that's what the ego wants you to believe. The ego, which is the conditioned self, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is
I'm
we
I'm
have
taking notes,
bias.
Tom.
We have
The
biases.
ego.
That's right. We
Mm-hmm.
have biases because we've been conditioned, and we're being conditioned by all kinds of forces: our
Mm-hmm.
family, culture, school, television, other sources of media. We're being conditioned, and that conditioning leads to a story that we call me, my, mine. Right, the me, my, mine. And it's in that
Mm-hmm.
story that we grasp. We grasp at the story, because it's only in the story that the ego gets to exist. Without the story, there is no ego. Without the story of me, my, mine, there is no ego. So suffering only happens in the space of a story, which is typically that reality should be different than it is.
So if that was the case, and you came to a place where you were able to accept reality as it is,
Hmm.
it seems like you would lose the desire to change, to um, seek more, to go you lose the desire to become more educated, or own a house, or get a car, or whatever those things are, because you're you're accepting the reality as it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Am I
Uh,
right?
no.
Good. Because I'm thinking, man, they don't have any incentive.
Hmm. No. They, change is a constant. It's the remaining the same. It's fixated on remaining the same that the Buddhist would argue is another source of suffering. which a lot of over-controlled people will do, right? They'll work hard to create a condition and really work hard to keep it from not changing. But of
Mm.
course, life is a series of change. Life
Mm-hmm.
changes the constant. Um, so uh, uh, it is perfectly healthy for people to have preferences, right? I have a preference to buy that house that I put
Mm-hmm.
a bid on, right? I have a preference. But if I make the outcome, that is closing on that house,
Mm-hmm.
be the source of my happiness, I will only be happy if I can get that house. Well, now
Yeah.
I'm likely to experience suffering. So there's
Mm.
a concept in Buddhism that to hold your preferences like you would a butterfly on the tip of your finger,
Oh.
right? To hold it like you would a butterfly on the
Mm-hmm.
tip of your finger, that you get to experience it, you get to enjoy it. But if it flies away,
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. But if you grasp at the butterfly,
You'll crush it
right, you'll
and
crush
kill
it.
it.
You're right, right. So, and that's that's the another concept in Buddhism, that most significant sources of suffering come from the grasping, that the demanding, right,
Mm-hmm.
that things be different, whether that's with substance abuse, whether that's uh, 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 other outcomes. I was talking to a colleague the other day who said that she was disappointed that her she had the goal of doubling the size of her business.
Oh.
And I said to her that goals, for it to be a goal, is something you have total control over. Everything else is an outcome. So we can't have total control over doubling our business because that requires other people's participation, right? That
Mm-hmm.
requires other people to purchase our product or service.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But and so it's fine to have that as an outcome, a
Mm-hmm.
preference, but
Right.
when outcomes are treated like goals, and that our value, our sense of self-worth is tied up in the achievement of that outcome, and then if it falls through, we feel shitty about ourselves.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That happens way too often.
Sure.
Unfortunately, way too often. Well, with when I think about Buddha's bedroom and the fact that to bring mindfulness into the bedroom
Mm.
as a means of breaking down barriers to intimacy. Can you kind of spend a little time explaining about Sternberg's theory about the
Those are two
area of
different
love?
things.
Okay.
So Sternberg's theory and the Buddha's bedroom is two different things. But so to go back to the Buddha's bedroom, though, one of the things that Fraser talks about that is, I think, the biggest takeaway
Mm-hmm.
is that we have to show up as a sexual being. And that can
Oh
be
yeah.
very hard for over controlled people, because showing up as a sexual being can feel very vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we don't
Mm-hmm.
like to feel vulnerable. And for some of us, in order to avoid feeling vulnerable, we have shut off that sexual energy, right? I think we may have shared in the first episode, I don't remember, but after a long-term relationship, I went to a psychologist, and I remember saying to the psychologist, I've come to realize I don't exude much of a sexual energy. And the
Mm.
psychologist said, "You're right, you don't." And
Oh my goodness. The
and
baby is ugly.
and I needed that validation.
Yes.
Right? It would have
Yes.
been very anti-therapeutic for her to say, "Oh, I think you're overreacting," or
Oh,
whatever it
of
is.
course. Of course. Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
And and because it was so spot on that over controlled
Mm-hmm.
people can have a tendency to shut down their sexual energy for a variety of reasons. But one of the biggest ones is to go along to get along,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
I see that in couples so much. And, you know, with my husband and I, we'll see it in folks around us. And it's very sad.
Yeah.
I think
Oh,
it's
yeah.
very sad because there's so much of their life that they're missing out on.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So, what Sternberg's theory of love, just kind of
Hmm.
pop
Yeah.
over there, is Sternberg came up with this concept that there are these three elements, and when they're in balance, they make for the perfect kind of relationship. And those three elements are intimacy, passion, and commitment. How did I do? I was doing it from memory.
You did great. That's exactly correct.
uh, Intimacy, passion, and commitment. Um, and if they are in equal proportion, then that makes for the most kind of fulfilling type of loving relationship. But sometimes you can have relationships that are out of balance. They may have commitment.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, they may have
Hmm.
intimacy, but they don't have passion,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Or they may have passion and intimacy, but they don't have commitment. Think of
Right.
affairs,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Um, and so the idea that I was inviting the
Mm.
reader to explore was, how does the over controlled temperament impact the imbalance that they're experiencing? Because presumably they're experiencing an imbalance, otherwise why are they reading the book?
Right.
Right? They're experiencing some kind of imbalance, and over controlled people tend to be very commitment oriented,
Hmm.
right? They may have kind of that intimacy. What he defines intimacy differently than I define intimacy in the book, but he defines it much more of like this kind of friendship quality,
Yeah. Liking.
liking, right, right.
Hmm.
Um, but passion for the over controlled person is often quite suppressed in a
I would
relationship.
think too that you the feelings that you have need to be mirrored in your partner or
Hmm.
partners. So I could feel like I could have all those elements, or I think I do, but I'm not, my partner doesn't see it that way,
Hmm.
you know? And when when I think this is spot on, actually, commitment, passion, and intimacy, because I've been a part of relationships, and I've seen relationships from kind of from afar. Like, you know, you hear of people, or people tell you different things, or even in session the patients will say things to me about their relationship. But when a marriage, um, when a couple separates in the bedroom, right? So you have a couple, one goes to one bedroom, one goes to the other. Usually
Hmm.
when the kids move out.
Hmm.
The kids
Hmm.
move out, there's an empty bedroom.
Hmm.
I'm going to go take little Junior's bedroom. And they'll do that because somebody snores, or maybe they now wear a CPAP or something
CPAP.
that's loud. There's some kind of a reason, but really, when we visit with that in session, and as I've talked to people, it becomes more evident that that separation, that intimacy, was gone long before, and this is just like an acceptable reason or excuse, or a socially acceptable
Mm-hmm.
to to move out of the room, or something they can explain to their partner that doesn't seem to be uh, so difficult for them to discuss, because they won't tell them the truth. It's more like, well, this is really loud. I'm not sleeping. I'm going to go into this other room and sleep. But really, it's the end of that it's the end of that intimacy.
Yeah, when couples, whether it's moving out of the same house, sometimes couples think that, oh, you know, if we have some space and we're living separately, we can work on the marriage. 85% of separations end in divorce, right?
Sure.
Uh,
Sure.
or when you're sleeping in separate bedrooms, um, there's just such a loss of opportunity.
Mhm.
So if, however, someone is saying, I struggle sleeping with you because of your snoring.
Mhm.
And if the person who snores does squat in doing anything about it, then
Mhm.
that's a violation of the relationship.
Mhm.
That if our partner is saying, I want to be able to sleep with you, but you're sleeping with you is now a problem, and the other person doesn't see it as, well, if it's a problem for my partner, it's a problem for me, because I
Right.
want to be able to sleep with my partner. And yet that is so common. It is
Mhm.
so common that I get,
Mhm.
particularly men, who have
Yep.
this kind of self-righteous tone of we'll just get over it. And what they're really saying is, I'm too afraid to go to the doctor and get any kind of news that I don't want to hear, is often the
Mhm.
case. Uh,
Mhm.
and then they are irritated that their partner wants to sleep in a separate bedroom.
Right. 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 And it's the beginning of the end.
It's the beginning of the end. Yeah. It's
Mhm.
like, I will tell people, think about your relationship on a train track. And if you were to imagine this trajectory that your current relationship is on,
Mhm.
and you just go, 10, 20, 30, 50 miles down the road, are you closer to
Mhm.
being together, or are you further apart?
Oh yeah, I agree. I think that's a great analogy. Part of part of my adult life, I lived in the southern states with a high evangelical Christian community, and what I saw there was the commitment being socially unacceptable to have a divorce or
Mm,
to yeah, to get a divorce. So it was very common for couples to sleep in separate bedrooms, and when you're in a community where that's common, it doesn't stand out like it particularly is a problem.
mm,
And then when I mean, obviously it is, but where the commitment is the stronger leg of that three-legged stool, that's of course the intimacy and pieces are just they just find it from another partner usually.
mm,
And then there there's the commitment piece of it. It seems to be more of kind of just what at that time when I lived there, it was probably 20 years ago now, but it was not, you just couldn't divorce. If you did, you were scandalous, right? So
right, right.
people did get a divorce, but it was, there was a lot of chatter around it. So I say that because it, in a triangle, you can have different lengths of that edge of each triangle, or each side.
Mm.
But what I understood from the book is that commitment, passion, and intimacy are equally strong. They have
That's your goal.
you
That's your
don't
goal.
have you don't have one over the other.
That's right. And why that is important is that, um, uh, what we may have talked about in a prior episode around monogamy, which is the
Oh yeah, that was
prevailing
our last episode.
which is the prevailing institution for a lot of relationships, particularly for over controlled people, is, monogamy comes with it a set of rights and responsibilities that most couples,
Mm.
when they say I do, they never explicate directly. You know, they just uh, uh, delude themselves in thinking their partner must already know what they mean, right? But when it
Mm.
comes to monogamy, monogamy has with it the right to enjoy each other's bodies in ways that other people don't have access to. Right? That's the right. I get to enjoy your body in ways that other people don't have access to, and you get to enjoy my body in ways that other people don't have access to. That isn't to say, however, that one loses their autonomy in having their body enjoyed. It just means that it's enjoyed in ways that other people don't have access to. The responsibility is being interested in the sexual needs of the other. And that's the piece that is often missing. So when you're in monogamy, you're committing to be interested in the sexual needs of the other because the option of going down the street has been taken off the table.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When a couple or when an individual says to themselves, I am no longer interested in sex, which is totally okay. It is totally, a celibacy is an absolutely perfectly fine choice.
Correct.
But in the context of monogamy, when one has made a decision to be celibate, it requires the other person to be celibate, which I call forced celibacy. Right? In order for them to be compliant with the monogamy agreement, that means they can't go down the street to get their sexual needs met. And so there have been a number of times when I've had a couple where one person is just totally not interested in sex. And I said, well, would it be okay for them to get sex elsewhere? And the answer is no. And they don't see that as a problem. They see that as just they shouldn't want to have sex with anybody else. But that's called forced celibacy. And while everybody has a right to say no to sex, if the contract is monogamy, and monogamy is sex with one person, and you're not having sex, and monogamy is sex with one person, then you're not monogamous anymore. That you've already broken the monogamy contract. Now, I don't get to define what sex means for a couple.
Right.
It doesn't have to mean penetration. But if the couple comes up with a definition of sex that meets their preferences and they're okay with it, then it's their definition of sex. But when there is this lack of interest in the sexual needs of the other, and that might mean my partner is not attracted to me because I snore, or my partner's not attracted to me because I'm not showering, or my partner's not attracted to me because I've gained 50 pounds, or my partner's not attracted to me because of X, Y, or Z. And then I don't do anything about it. I'm not attending to my partner's sexual needs. They may need these kinds of things.
Yeah. 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 Keith and I wrapped it up in one word: consideration.
Consideration. Yeah. I've used that many times with my couples. I really valued that when I heard the two of you talk about it that way.
Yeah, we're considerate of each other. We are far from perfect, but we definitely are very considerate of each other.
I don't know. You two are pretty perfect. I've got to spend some time with you.
Thanks. He's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
My eyes light up when I think of him.
I can tell. Hello there, dear readers. I'm absolutely thrilled to announce the release of the Making Nice with Nadia audiobook, narrated by yours truly. As the author, I've poured my heart and soul in telling your story, especially how your psychological temperament shows up in the bedroom and how it gets in the way of intimacy. With every sentence, every emotion, I'm right there with you, guiding you through getting more meaning and fulfillment in your sexual and intimate relationships. The wait is over. You can now download the audiobook on Audible or from my website, drtommurray.com, and immerse yourself in where you reclaim the playfulness of your sexuality. My voice is your compass as you navigate through every titillating moment, gaining powerful insights from psychology. Claim your aha moment. Click on the link and join me on this unforgettable journey toward making nice with Nadia. Making Nice with Nadia audiobook, available on Audible. Download now.
One of the other things in the book that I was reading about was becoming emotionally available. And Thomas Lynch has his cues. And there's a whole bunch of cues. Becoming emotionally available. And in the chapter, I think this is all part of breaking down barriers to intimacy, right? So kind of rewind a little bit. An over control person goes into a relationship with a neutral face. There's very little there's not a lot of communication happening. So they do things to help them become more personable into that relationship of the eyebrows or whatever that is, to express how they're feeling. We help them with understanding the being mindful and being aware of what's going on in the present, using the example of the triangle theory of love with the three legs of the stool: commitment, passion, and intimacy. And then and then then you go into Thomas Lynch and his cues on I have them written down. So social safety, novelty, rewarding, threatening, and overwhelming cues.
Mm-hmm.
Can you go into some detail about that?
So when things happen in the lives of an over-controlled person, they're
Mm-hmm.
going to experience it through one of those cues are going to be activated, such as this. Is the safety net, is that going to be activated, right? Or are they going to be overwhelmed because things are too novel, right? So, for example, let's say your partner comes to you and says, they finally muster up enough courage and they say, I want you to wear a strap on and peg me, right?
And
So
now Francis knows what that means.
thank you, Making Nice with Naughty podcast. Uh,
Things
right.
I didn't know.
Yeah. And so for some over control people, that is too novel, right? That's too foreign, and it activates their threatened cue, right? That just, and
Uh-huh.
it shuts them down,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's in essence just a way of thinking about what does the over controlled person need in order to feel like they can lean into a little mystery, a little novelty, a little uncertainty without becoming overwhelmed with
Mm-hmm.
anxiety. What
Mm-hmm.
was your particular takeaway? What stood out for you?
Well, for me, it was just how the trying to think. I was interested in the safety,
Mm,
the social safety cues, and then when I later on in the chapter you talk about the exercise where you make a campfire
right.
and kind of set up those safety areas. I I really have a hard time kind of connecting with some of this stuff because I haven't experienced a lot of your um, what your folks in your book have experienced.
Yeah.
You know, so I do struggle with, like, okay, what makes sense, what connects. Usually, I'm still stuck in, oh, how do we accept reality as it is?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I but when I let me just bring up while I'm thinking about it. Let me just bring up your book real quick because I have some things I love the fact that I can put this on my Kindle
Mm,
and highlight. I also want to tell you, little segue, when you copy something out of your book and I paste it into a document, it cites you, which is
yeah.
wonderful.
Isn't that cool?
That's very wonderful.
Mm.
Okay, go back. Okay. So I would say the social safety cues is something that I can see that resonates with me in
Mm,
the sense that when there's groups of people I can be a part of and I feel very connected, and then there's other times I may enter into a group and feel like something isn't right.
right.
And that has happened. Um, that's happened to me when I was active duty military, when I was active duty Air Force. There's a whole um, menu of rules that are involved in when you come into a room when you're with people. And as an officer, I would go into a room, and if I was walking into a room of enlisted people, they were cued to stand,
Mm.
which is very weird if you're not accustomed to that. And I would actually hide from being around a lot of enlisted people in the very beginning, like the first year or so of being in the military. And just as a little side note, I joined the service when I was in my 40s. And so I came in to the military as an adult person when most of the people in the military are young adult people. And so a lot of the crazy stuff that they do, I just think, oh, isn't that sweet? But I'm not going to participate. So, but I'm supposed to participate because that's the rules.
Mm.
Well, being in the military, my first duty station was at Andrews Air Force Base, and one of the first places I had to go to was part of my in processing was to this little class about this is your first duty assignment, and it's really for young adult people who are first timers away from home to tell them things like don't get drunk, don't be stupid, follow the laws and whatever. So I I am walking around with my little map of trying to figure out where this class even is. I walk in with my uniform. They're all assuming that I'm in the instructor because I'm an older woman,
Ah.
right?
Uh-huh.
And my rank wasn't that great. I think I was a lieutenant. So I was really low rank, but not uncommon for someone who's been an enlisted member for a long time, then goes to officer training, becomes an officer, and then has this rank. So they're all kind of thinking, this is somebody who's been in the military for some time. Well, when I walk in the room, I am clueless, Tom, about what I'm supposed to go. I'm just looking for a place to sit, you
Mm.
know? And I walk in and all the chatter immediately stops. Somebody calls the room to attention. Everybody stands. I have no idea what's happened. And I am not sure. It takes about, a few seconds, awkward time to realize that I'm the reason why they're all standing. And they're waiting for me
Just
to cue them to sit down.
yeah.
And so you do that by as you are or have a seat or whatever you say.
And were you at all program or told like that's the
Oh,
protocol?
oh yes, but that was, a week or two earlier. And so when I went to officer training school, they taught us all that kind of stuff. But, you're really stressed out when you're going through officer training school and you don't
You mean
remember
officer training
stuff.
school is just like a week?
No, it was 6 weeks.
6 weeks.
It was
Okay.
6 weeks. But it had been about a week prior when I
Ah,
got out of
ah,
officer training when I showed up.
I see.
So I was supposed to know, but okay. I didn't remember. And I walked in, they all stood up, and I just told them, I said, hello, just sit down, just here for a class, which was so bad, you know. And then a very kind master sergeant, and a master sergeant is one of the higher ranking enlisted staff. And really, their job is to help us not look like such bozos. So he was very kind and he pulled me aside and he said, can I help you, ma'am? And I'm like, I'm just here for a class. And so he took me out of that room, the front door, and he took me around to the back. And I walked in the back without them being aware that I was in the room so I could be a part of the information without activating them.
Ah, wow.
It's so complicated. And
Yeah.
then thinking about the whole social safety cues. Um, I was avoidant of walking um, where there's when you're in uniform and you're outside and you're walking. If somebody's walking towards you and they are of higher rank, you're supposed to salute them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You salute them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm on a base where there's Navy people and Marines, and who the hell can read their rank? Their rank is craziness. So it was I sought out opportunity to not run into people. And there's one loophole with this is that if you're walking encumbered, so you have something to both of your hands.
Uh-huh.
So I have my phone and my notebook
Uh-huh.
walking. I don't have to salute because I
Oh.
can't. See, my hands are full.
Uh-huh.
So you do all these silly things thinking about how because of social cues. But when I got more acclimated to the military and more acclimated to what was normal and felt more comfortable about it, it was an expectation, and that with that comes that calming, comes that reassurance that okay, things are going well, I'm doing this
Mm.
right.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I know this is like really off out there compared to what you're trying to talk about in your book, but that's what I think about. I'm
That's
When I know that I'm in the right place doing the right thing, breathe better,
that's right. That's
I'm
right.
less stressed,
Yeah.
you know.
When you feel like you're fully integrated into the tribe, as Thomas Lynch would
Mhm.
say, and that you're a part of the community, you're well established. It just is this. It relaxes all of those parts of you that would otherwise be hypervigilant.
So with the over controlled temperament or that person, is their tribe pretty small?
It often is. Initially, particularly those who have maladaptive levels of over control, it's so small that
Mhm.
one of the common complaints that people who are over controlled have is that they feel lonely,
Mm.
right? So the loneliness is pretty epidemic among uh, uh, over controlled people.
That's
So
interesting.
just to kind of go back to your example to highlight,
Mhm.
it's because you were so what I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were so adamant about not fucking up, essentially,
Oh, right,
right?
right.
And the over controlled person is very rule oriented. That's why people who are rule oriented tend to do well in the military,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that you didn't want to do anything that would alienate you from the tribe
Yes,
of
yes.
your military colleagues, and that's what freezes a lot of over controlled people, that they don't take some risk because they don't want to look like a fool, essentially, right?
Yes,
and
yes.
and because they don't want to look like a fool, other people might experience them as unapproachable, aloof,
Mhm.
etc., etc.,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
To give you
Mhm.
another kind of example, and this may be a segue to the next one, which is the novelty cue. But
Mhm.
imagine a couple who are swingers, and swingers are people who will engage in extracurricular sex with other people, consensually, often with their partner present and participating, or they may be in separate rooms, but they go off and they have fun with other adults. Let's say that there's a couple, John and Jackie, right? John and Jackie, and John uh, uh, is able to just decide by looking at pictures. Oh, I could have sex with so and so. I could have sex with so and so. And John gets upset that Jackie, his wife, is like, well, I'm not going to make a decision on whether I'm going to have sex with someone just by their picture, right? Jackie feels
Mhm.
like she needs to meet the people, right? Now,
Mhm.
as I would tell John and Jackie that if the rest of the animal kingdom could talk, The animal kingdom would think that it was absolutely bizarre that humans would decide on who they would have sex with just by a picture. The animal kingdom would be like, there's only one way to decide if you're going to have sex with someone. You have to smell them first. Right? And so in some ways, what does smelling do? Smelling helps to provide a sense of safety, right? It gives us some information, right? Um, Before you go into the novelty of an experience of having sex with someone that you may not have met before. How was that as a tie-in? Did you?
I just keep thinking my little doggy when he comes around and he smells me. Does he want to have sex with me?
Well, he's not necessarily wanting to have sex with you, but wanting to uh, check if you're a friend or foe,
Yeah.
right? If should I be on high alert? Should I not be on high alert? That's why cats, right? They rub up against you. They're trying to release some of their scent glands
Mm-hmm.
to mark you as, okay. You've been a friend to me.
I think it's all very fascinating, and I can only imagine in your practice when you run into couples or have an experience where you're seeing this unfold in front of you, how interesting that is. And I, in my practice, because I didn't have the insider info on this, so to speak, it probably just right over my head as I see it right in front of me. The other thing I do want to ask you about, like, we had talked about, maybe it was the second episode, about, remember, the come apart, people having their come apart
Yes.
with
Yes, the emotional leakage.
yes, the emotional leakage. I would imagine that how um, that how a person responds in these cues can also lead to that, like, the overwhelming cue, or just feeling like so activated
Right.
that you have that breakdown, or you have a come apart, as
Mm-hmm.
Mama Judy so perfectly said. You
Yes.
know, am I
And it can,
right?
yes, the overwhelming cue, or the
Uh
threatening
huh.
cue is that kind of potentially dangerous or harmful.
Mm-hmm.
The overwhelming is the extreme version of the threatening cue. And for a lot of over controlled people, they tend to uh, uh, compartmentalize their feelings to such a high degree that uh, uh, you may not know that they're irritated, agitated, distressed, because they're thinking, how do I navigate this situation? How do I get out of it? How do I de-escalate it? But sometimes there's nothing that they try is able to
Mm-hmm.
de-escalate it, and then they have the emotional leakage, but usually
Mm-hmm.
only around people uh, who they trust will be there after the mess is made,
Mm-hmm.
right?
It's like a survival technique. It's like you're scared to the point where you're frozen.
Mm-hmm. You mean the
The overwhelming.
that where you kind of just uh, 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 well, I think that certain people certainly can experience it differently. Uh, uh, I believe we talked in a prior episode how there's the fatalistic mindset and the fixed mindset,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And different people gravitate to one or the other. And that fatalistic mindset is going to be is going to be a tendency to go inward, where people who have more of that fixed mindset may have an external orientation with their energy. When they're upset, they're going to be out there. I know that for me, as an over-controlled person who tends towards being who tends to be more overly disagreeable, And so when you have that overly disagreeable mindset, which is that need to be right, versus
Mm.
the overly agreeable, which is the need to be liked,
Mm.
so those are kind of two subtypes of the over-controlled person. And so if you have that over-controlled need to be right, um, you're going to have more emotional leakage, right? Because you're trying to get the system back in order,
Mm-hmm.
in order being what the over-controlled person thinks is the right way, right? And often
Mm-hmm.
people will, over-controlled people who have a disagreeable subtype might use the words about their partner, for example, they don't respect me. I want them to respect me. And they use respect as a euphemism for, I want them to be compliant with my requests. So they
Oh, I see that
confuse
so
respect
often.
with compliance,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they use respect. And so sometimes, or I'll often challenge those people who use the word respect when it's clear to me what they really want is obedience,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and how the annihilation of difference, when we try to get our partners to not be different than us because being different than us makes us feel anxious, to call that out, because that can quickly become, abusive, quite honestly,
Mm-hmm.
is that annihilation of difference. And so the over-controlled people can think something is threatening or think something is overwhelming, particularly when it seems to violate a rule that they have about how the world should be, must be, or has to be. And the
Can
more
that go
and
ahead?
the
I'm
more that
sorry.
they grasp to that
Mm-hmm.
rule, right? We can bring that Buddhist concept back in. The
Mm-hmm.
more they grasp at that rule, and life, of course, isn't bending towards our rules, um, the more likely they are going to have one of those explosive moments.
The When I read about the overwhelming cues, I think of a panic attack. Would that be appropriate? I mean,
Uh,
that
uh,
is that what you've seen? Like a person, I've had folks that have
yeah,
anxiety, they have
right.
panic disorder, and of course, I've never delved into this. I'm going to talk to them about medicines,
Yeah,
prescribe them something to help them, and kind of help them with what leads up to having that panic attack. And we'll talk about that piece of it. But it makes me wonder now, folks that are experiencing these panic attacks, really what they're having is they're in a situation where they feel overwhelmed.
they feel overwhelmed. Panic only happens
Mm-hmm.
when there's an unwillingness to experience the anxiety that precedes it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you
True.
if you if you ever slow someone down who has a history of panic, they
Mm-hmm.
notice something's happening, and then they argue with that experience, or they catastrophize that experience. I'm having a heart attack, I can't breathe, I'm going to die, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why
Mm-hmm.
people like you and me who know what anxiety is, it's virtually
Mm-hmm.
impossible for someone who knows what anxiety is to ever have a
Mm-hmm.
panic attack.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
never
Never
going to
had a panic.
escalate to
Never
it.
had a panic attack.
Right. But I certainly have anxiety attacks, right? I have this experience of anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Usually when I experience it, it's in the absence of catastrophizing thoughts, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to you off radio about on an occasion, I'll wake up in the middle of the night with a flood of anxiety for no
Mm-hmm.
reason. Um, but I don't make a
But
story out of it.
there is a reason.
There is a reason, yeah, but it's not there's no
Yes.
thoughts, worrisome
Yes.
thoughts. I'm not worrying about anything, um,
No.
and because I know what's happening, it never escalates to a panic attack.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'll wrap up with this thought and would like to hear kind of your opinion about it. I've not yet tried it or had a client try it, but there was a psychiatrist who found that he could quickly knock out a panic attack by giving their client a warhead.
Oh, sure. Sure.
That
Absolutely. That's a
it's
great idea.
yeah, that it's so sour. It's so makes your lips just pucker.
It's like a slap in the face. Not that I'm saying that that would be a good treatment.
Remember in the 70s, you saw all the movies would show some woman being slapped in the face because she's hysterical.
Yes.
It was so normalized. Of course, it was so ridiculous. But yeah, this concept of just putting in not like a Sour Patch Kid, those are
Mm-hmm.
too mild,
Mm-hmm.
but just the warhead, and it
Oh
pulls you
yeah.
out of being in your head,
Mm-hmm.
um, and into your body. Yeah.
I'm sure something like smelling salts would do the same thing.
Oh.
You know,
Huh.
I what I love that. I love this dialogue because we it almost seems like anxiety has become the vogue, you know, mental disorder. Like
Hmm.
the cool kids have anxiety, and and becomes very normalized. And I know I've talked to you great lengths about my philosophy about treatment and how I wouldn't want people to become professional outpatients going to see their therapist on a
Right.
regular basis because they can't survive without seeing a therapist,
Hmm.
and the importance of resiliency and people being able to live with themselves and in a community that best suits them. That when when I have so many folks who I do see under the umbrella of anxiety, you know, I the more I'm reading your book, the more I'm learning about that over controlled temperament. That's really what I'm looking at. I
Yeah.
really am looking at the over controlled person, and and um, and the just the challenges that they face that are so real. They've manufactured this in their head, but it's so real, and
Hmm.
it causes them to behave in a way that is self-preservating. Self,
That's right.
keeps
Yeah.
them they're self-secure at the detriment of everything around them.
That's right. That's right. And that's why
Mm-hmm.
Thomas Lynch says that mental wellness is cultivating a life worth sharing.
Mm, that's beautiful.
Yeah. And what you described, though, is that anxiety kicks in the self preservation, which is a
Mm-hmm.
life of alienation,
Mm-hmm.
not a life of sharing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so interesting. I have really gotten so much out of this, Tom. I really have. I I know that there's more into this chapter, and I really encourage people to take out the time, read the chapter. This is not a substitute for reading the
That's
book.
so much more.
There's so much more in your book, and I encourage people to reach back out to us, ask questions, let us know what where they're stuck at, or the weird things that they've see or they've experienced, or just things they would like to share. But this has been a very precious time, Tom.
Oh, it's always a joy to be with you, Frances. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. And so we will our next episode we'll be going over chapter 6, and it's entitled Letting Your Values Guide You. So this is all about value driven lifestyle is how I think of that, and I'll learn more about it as I read through, so I can come and ask you questions that only Frances would think about.
And you ask great questions.
Oh, well, you give great answers. I love it when you say, so what I think you're trying to ask me, because I've gone all over the neighborhood, and what are you trying to ask me, Francis? Anyway, it's a delight, Tom. Such a delight. Thank you so much.
Until next time. And that wraps up another episode of Making Nice with Naughty. We hope you enjoyed our exploration of intimacy for the rule-following and organized.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you found our discussions helpful or intriguing, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review.
Your feedback means the world to us, and it helps others discover the podcast. Plus, it lets us know what topics you'd like us to cover in the future episodes.
Have questions or you want to share your experiences? Connect with us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. Links on the description.
And for more in-depth insights, be sure to grab a copy of my book, Making Nice with Naughty, available on Amazon and Audible for the audiobook.
Thank you again for spending time with us. Remember, you can be both organized and adventurous in matters of the heart.
Until next time, keep making nice with Naughty. To renew your passion
and ignite